Mangwana ni mwalelepo vukenjani. Kekwas dumelang wanave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the show that remains your portal into Africa's most potent stories. We'll be joined by Talent Gore as she delivers the Zimbabwe report a little later on the show. However, let's have a look at some of the top stories we'll be talking about. World Trade Organization talks collapse in Yaounde as e-commerce duty dispute blocks deal. CAF Secretary General steps down amid Afcon final fallout crisis. Women-led festival in Eastern Congo, and this is in Goma, uses music to call for peace amid conflict. Caster Semenya, legendary South African athlete, criticizes IOC chief, and that is Kirsty Coventry, over the ban on transgender women athletes. South Africa tourism surges, and this is despite international travel warnings. DSTV 285, GoTV 25, 1up2.com, Network Media Hub on YouTube, as well as NTV Africa on YouTube, that's Africa with a K, and ntvafrica.my.na. Those are the spaces that you can always catch Africa Good Morning, and do have a look at the small banner beneath me right now to make sure that you stay connected with us and NTV. My name is Ashwin Berry. We'll get into our top stories shortly.
Namibia is a land of movement, with waves that never stop reaching forward. Here, adventure is not something we search for. It is something we are born into. In every corner of this country, creativity rises, from artists, from athletes, from dreamers. And when the world comes to explore Namibia, they discover something extraordinary. Because when sport moves people, creativity moves ideas, and tourism moves the world toward us. Something powerful happens. A platform where movement meets imagination, where industries connect, where opportunity grows, where Namibia's next chapter begins. Welcome to the Creative Sport Tourism Expo. Exhibit, partner, experience, creative sport tourism.
All right, it's time to get into the top stories. World Trade Organization talks in Yaounde ended early yesterday without agreement on reform agriculture and renewal of a global ban on customs duties for e-commerce after divisions blocked a deal. Ministers failed to extend the moratorium preventing levies on cross-border digital transmissions, dealing a blow to developed countries and Washington. WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala says efforts had been made despite the outcome. Negotiations stretched beyond the planned Sunday close as countries sought some kind of consensus. A draft text suggesting minimal agreement on reform briefly emerged after overnight talks but collapsed when Brazil blocked progress over lack of movement on agriculture. The World Trade Organization has struggled to advance agricultural negotiations, a sensitive issue globally. Countries had entered talks aiming only for a joint declaration for future negotiations. Discussions occurred amid heightened trade tensions and economic turmoil linked to the Middle East war. Reform remained central as ministers sought to revive a weakened WTO facing geopolitical strain and stalled negotiations. The General Secretary of the Confederation of African Football announced he would step down during a turbulent period marked by controversy over Afcon decisions. Veron Mosengo-Omba said he was retiring to focus on personal projects, though his departure follows disputes over stripping Senegal of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations title and postponing the women's tournament. These developments have left CAF facing a crisis of confidence. In his statement, Mosengo-Omba said he could leave with peace of mind after dispelling suspicions raised against him, adding he leaves the organization more prosperous. The 66-year-old had faced criticism for remaining in the role beyond the mandatory retirement age and allegations of a toxic work environment, though an investigation cleared him. Appointed in March 2021, he served as deputy to President Patrice Motsepe. Reuters reported competitions director Samson Adamo will act in the role. CAF awaits a decision from the Court of Arbitration for Sport regarding Senegal's appeal after their Afcon final result against Morocco was overturned following a protest during the match. In Goma, Eastern Congo, a women-led festival brings music and performance to a region shaped by prolonged conflict. Clemence Fundiko Minja, known as Clem Cleopatre, performed at the closing of the three-day Musika na Kipaji festival, which promotes women artists. She spoke about growing up surrounded by violence and using music to encourage women not to feel alone. Eastern Congo has faced violence for 3 decades, with millions displaced in what the United Nations describes as a major humanitarian crisis. Goma had already hosted hundreds of thousands of displaced people before coming under control of Rwanda-backed M23 rebels last year, leaving residents cut off and facing difficult conditions. Now, despite this, cultural events continue intermittently. The festival drew young people who gathered to dance and express shared experiences. One of the attendees said such gatherings had become rare but meaningful. Organizer Esther Abumba said the festival aimed to promote women artists while using art as a non-violent tool to advocate for peace. South African Olympic champion Caster Semenya criticized the International Olympic Committee leadership following a new policy banning transgender women from women's Olympic events. The IOC decision aligns with the United States executive order ahead of 2028 Los Angeles Games and also affects athletes with differences in sex development. Speaking after a race in Cape Town, Semenya said consultations felt like a procedural exercise rather than genuine engagement, adding that as an African leader and woman, IOC President Kirsty Coventry should understand perspectives from the Global South. Semenya questioned the scientific basis of the policy, demanding transparency on decision-making. The IOC said the policy aims to protect fairness in competition, noting small performance margins at elite level. Coventry stated it would not be fair for biological males to compete in female categories and emphasized the need for a unified policy instead of leaving rules to individual sports. Here is Caster Semenya criticizing the decision in her own words.
For her being a woman coming from Africa, knowing how, African women or women in the global south are affected by that, of course, it causes a harm, bodily, I'll say. And for her, obviously, if you say the science, because we talk about science here, if the science is clear, show us who decided. Because over here we're talking about human rights, we're talking about diversity, and if you are an organization like IOC, you're talking about diversity. Act like one. Don't act like we're here for policy, seeking for power. This is not for power. This is for you to be a leader. So obviously we're expecting them to act in that manner. For you as a woman, why will you be tested to prove that you fit? It's like now we need to prove that we are worthy as women to take part in sports. That's a disrespect for women. But for anyone, everyone has their own opinion. But for me personally, I'll say, why will you allow women to take part in sports if you're going to question them?
Staying with South Africa, the tourism industry is experiencing some significant growth despite travel warnings from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand, highlighting crime and security risks. The sector is nearing 1 million direct jobs while attracting domestic and international visitors. Travel advisories caution about violent crime, scams, and safety concerns, urging increased vigilance, particularly in major cities. Despite this, tourism data shows rising demand, with domestic trips and hotel occupancy reaching or exceeding pre-pandemic levels. Statistics indicate tourism contributes nearly 9% of GDP, with spending on accommodation, transport, and entertainment expanding rapidly. Cities including Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg report strong visitor numbers, while smaller destinations are also benefiting. Domestic travel has been a key driver, generating significant spending and supporting operators. International arrivals are increasing, supported by favorable exchange rates and improved connectivity. High-value segments such as luxury safaris and business tourism contribute strongly. Authorities highlight tourism as a major employment driver, particularly for youth and women, with plans to expand its economic contribution further. Those have been our top stories on Africa Good Morning. Now, consultations have begun with regards to the proposed constitutional amendment bill number 3 in Zimbabwe. The nurses are on strike and 15 Zimbabwean nationals were killed in the Russia-Ukraine war. Talent Gore joins us with that and more after the weather. All right, it's time for us to be joined by Talent Gore, who is in Harare, Zimbabwe, here to deliver the Zimbabwe report. Talent, wamkase.
Tamuka edukana mamkao, mamkase Africa.
Tamuka yedu. You know, I feel ashamed, Talent. Rufano tanga ndichiwombera every time we start our broadcast. We should remember our culture. But let's move on. Consultations have begun with regards to Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, which has been widely criticized because it does seek to extend the president's tenure and as well as move voting elections from the popular vote to parliament, amongst other amendments. Talk to us, Talent.
Yes, they began yesterday, and right now we have a video of one of the citizens who was arrested at the public hearings because he is opposing the bill. So here's a video to that. So the public hearings officially kicked off yesterday, and they are set to be conducted across all districts in the country throughout the week as Parliament seeks input from citizens on the proposed constitutional changes. Some residents who spoke to the media said that they had arrived early yesterday to secure an opportunity to be heard amid that the consultations would attract significant public interest. Parliament is also expected to gather views for citizens nationwide. As of yesterday, the consultations were being done across all the other districts in Zimbabwe, but today they are going to be held in Harare. There are some consultations which will be held in Harare, and it is expected to be the biggest. In Bulawayo, there were and lots of residents, Bulawayo residents who were at the city hall, who were also participating, taking part in the proposed constitutional amendment bill number 3, which is being dubbed as CAB 3. And there were some concerns around that. the ruling party was busing citizens from across the country, from rural areas to urban centers. As you can see in that video, that is in Bulawayo, and there were concerns that most of the people who were there, they are not from Bulawayo, but rather they were bused from the rural areas to come to the city or in Bulawayo to partake at the public hearings of the Constitution Bill number 3. Apparently, there were citizens were also arrested for voicing out their concerns. Most of the citizens, particularly those within the opposition party, they are against the constitutional amendment bill number 3 because it is granting parliament the power to elect a president. So for, as you all know, for Zimbabwe, it is one man of one vote before. But right now, if this bill is passed, parliament, members of parliament are the ones who will be given the power to elect the president. So most of the people, they are not in agree with this constitutional amendment bill number 3. That is one of the clauses that people are not in agreement with. And you also find out that the vice president, Constantino Chiwenga, is not in support of the constitutional amendment bill number 3. So a lot is happening right now in Zimbabwe in terms of this new amendment bill. So we're just going to be monitoring the situation to see how the public hearings are going to be held. We understand that some people were arrested yesterday, and I believe there is a video to that. So if we can just take a look at the video.
Right now, we are very much afraid of airing out their complaint. I'm 100% against the constitutional amendment number 3. We seek to take over the power of the people in mandating the president of Zimbabwe. What we are saying is, my submission is informed by the values and principles of the national struggle. In the liberation struggle, one man, one vote was at the center of the liberation struggle. And the young people are ready to partake in another liberation struggle if it means that you are going to take away our right to liberation. Now, number 2, we also want to elect our leaders because we want our leaders to know that we have mandated them and they all. We have removed, we want to remove the mandate from the citizens. We want to put it to a few power elite. We're going to vote, we're going to be given things, we're going to be given money, we're going to be given loans so that we can elect the president who is voting.
And as we understand, Denford Sitole was arrested. I was looking at some reports earlier this morning, Talent. I believe he was taken to Bulawayo Central. They haven't quite clarified on the charges, but I believe it has something to do with the T-shirt he was wearing. So we'll get more details on that as we move on. Now, Talent, a sad development indeed. We covered a bit of this last week, but would love more detail. 15 Zimbabwe nationals killed during the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yes, well, this was said by the Minister of Information and Publicity, Comrade Dr. Soda Jemu, last week. He said that 15 Zimbabweans have died while fighting on the Russian side in the Russia-Ukraine war. Well, he made this at a press conference with journalists, marking the first official acknowledgement of the scale of local involvement. Information Minister held a news conference in Harare that 66 other Zimbabweans recruited into the conflict are still alive, with authorities working to bring them back home. He added that government is also engaged in efforts to repatriate the remains of those killed. The Zimbabwean president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, has directed his men to with urgency and resolve this issue. The minister also said that they are seized with this on several critical fronts. First, regarding the deceased, the government is actively engaged in the complex diplomatic and logistical efforts required to repatriate remains of the deceased. Recent reports have exposed the growing recruitment of Africans into the Russian forces, often through third-party agents promising lucrative civilian jobs. The revelations have sparked concerns in countries such as Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, and according to Ukraine, more than 1,100 Africans are fighting for Russia, although analysts believe the true figure could be higher. Kenyan intelligence estimates estimates suggest over 1,000 of its nationals have been recruited. In February 2026, Ghana said more than 50 of its citizens had been killed after being lured into the conflicts, with Foreign Minister Samuel Ablakwa warning the actual toll could be greater. And African governments have largely taken a cautious diplomatic stance on the war, worrying of straining ties with Russia. South Africa, for instance, has stopped short of directly blaming Moscow, instead pointing to unscrupulous recruitment agents. So 15 Zimbabweans were killed in the Russia-Ukraine war, and the government right now is making plans to ensure that they repatriate the borders back to Zimbabwe. But there are a number of Zimbabwean citizens who have been recruited into the Russian army to fight against Ukraine. So we're just going to be monitoring the situation and also to hear from the Foreign Affairs Minister when the borders of those who died there will be back in Zimbabwe. So because I'm sure the families, they want to know when and how the bodies of those who died, of the deceased, will be brought back home. So we're just going to be monitoring the situation and to hear what the government has to say next.
And in the last of your stories, Talent, we're talking about the nurses going on strike.
Yes, last week I did a story whereby the Salim Gabe hospital nurses and the Parinyato group of hospital nurses, they downed their tools. But as of now, Zimbabwe's main nurses union has formally served notice of a nationwide strike set to begin on April 15, threatening to cripple the country's already fragile public health system if the government fails to address a raft of pay and conditions grievances. The Zimbabwe National Nurses Association served the notice on the Health Service Commission on Thursday, giving authorities until April 14 to respond, a deadline the union described as a deliberate extension beyond the statutory 48-hour notice period. The nurses said that we have been instructed by our members to advise your office that all nurses under your employ are going to embark in a nationwide strike. Well, this was said by the Zimbabwe Nurses Association Executive President Enoch Dongo. So in that video, that was last week when the nurses at Parinyato group of hospitals downed their tools and they were partaking in a march, and they were marching to the Health Service Commission and give their handwritten letter to inform the Health Commission of their intent to go on strike if their grievances are not met by April 15.
All right. Thank you very much, Talent, for delivering such a comprehensive Zimbabwe report.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me.
Always good having you on Africa Good Morning. DSTV 285, GoTV 25, 1up2.com, Network Media Hub, and ntvafrica.my.na is precisely where you can find us. Tomorrow, Rorisang Mohojwe joins us from Gaborone, Botswana, delivering the Botswana Report, including an important update. Botswana's parliament has just approved a bill that will allow the establishment of a constitutional court. President Duma Boko, amongst others, have been pushing for this quite fervently. So we expect to be getting that full update from Rorisang, and of course, we'll still be bringing you the top stories from across Africa. My name is Ashwin Bedi. This has been Africa Good Morning. Swela Zaganaka.